Basically, over the past 4.5 years, I've helped build PixArt. We've become basically the leading social destination in the world for people to create and discover awesome content. What we've done is simplistically merge best-in-suite, mobile-first Adobe platform with a social platform like Instagram, where people can create great content through 3,000 different tools, whether they're GIFs, animations, clip art, frames, all sorts of things, including images, and combine that with a community of collaboration and discovery and socializing around that content and the creators. In that process, which is a process, every company takes its stages of growth, which is important, how you look at your partnerships and where you place your focus in relation to this conference. We've come to grow to 350 people in 5 offices around the world, including in China on the ground, where we're one of the fastest growing apps in the world over there, in Japan, in Europe, in LA, in San Francisco. I've myself opened every one of these offices, except for the Eastern European one. We're actually founded out of Armenia, which, for most people, you will never go there. It is an amazing place. The food is amazing. It's got great history and culture. But Greylock introduced me to the founder just about a year into its origination, where there was just about 15 developers, himself and a co-founder, hacking at, basically creating editing tools about 4.5 years ago. So we've grown a lot in between, capital raised, expanded, and executed across a multitude of things that you'll be talking about today in more depth. So what does that mean? Over 500 million users to date. It's a few, not as big as Instagram yet or some others, but we're working our way there. It's a lot compared to thousands and thousands of applications out there who are doing just fine in their own right. That's about 2.4 billion sessions a month, and these are a little bit outdated. We'll probably do an update, PR release in the coming month or so, but it's quite a few sessions. It's over 100 million monthly active users. More than half of those are active on a weekly basis. And so it's not just really utility, it's really about community and social engagement. Almost 1 billion now images created directly through PixArt that are shared within the community, where our creators have millions and millions of followers, or that may be shared externally on other platforms like Weibo, or Line, or Instagram, or Facebook. And we have about 50 to almost 100 actually million stickers created, as well as remixes. Remixing, allowing for anybody in this room to share your assets and your content with other people, for other people to edit that version and have a long history of thousands of iterations of your original. A single edit that is made free to edit will generate over 40,000 new versions of that content in a single year. And we have about, I can't remember, but quite a few. I mean, most of them will generate hundreds of thousands of new versions of your original asset and create a huge social feed of new followers, discovery, and people learning how to create content and discover content. So it's quite a bit of content, quite a bit of users. We're very global. Most huge apps are very global. Lucky if you can pull off a 50–70% user base, primarily in the US, relative to your demographic, like Snap has. Challenge with Snap is they're struggling in Japan, they're struggling in China, and other emerging markets where other use cases, other competitors on the communication side already have monopolistic presence, or behavioral habits or device quality and performance don't support necessarily all great social platforms out there. So we grow significantly in the APAC market because emergence of devices, desire for people to share content, to discover other people, to socialize, to westernize, has driven great growth for us in those regions. And because we're very global, we're also very Android on a general basis. Obviously, if you have a lot of the users around the world, most of them are using Android devices outside the US. I mean, the anecdote is 5 years ago, you're in Silicon Valley and you're raising money, and they only want to see an iOS version of your app because everybody there has an iOS phone. You fast forward 5 years later, nobody asks you about whether you're iOS first, because it's a global market and people have multiple devices around the world that are more than just iOS. And if you want to be a billion-dollar company, you are a global company. Gender, about 45% male, 55% female. That can vary around the world. In India, we're very male. In Japan, we're very female. Age groups is mostly 18 to 25 is about 35% of our user base. 16 to 30 is about 70% almost. So we skew older than Musically. We skew in basically a concentrated environment of Instagram, and Facebook. So let's talk about what matters and how we got there. If you want to reverse engineer all this, I'll give you 10 tips about how we're building a billion-dollar company and one of the largest mobile platforms in the world. One of the most important things that you can think about is really the K factor and the usability around your product. Nothing can override the fact that people need to share or engage other people in your product, and nothing can override the fact that the usability of your experience will drive your virality and your key KPIs. So the most important thing any publisher and developer can do is really focus on what are the use cases around the product that make it social and that drive the virality factor. And it can be at the moment of onboarding, whether you're loading up your address book, whether you're inviting friends. It could be within the app where you're sharing content, where you're looking to invite your friends to consume your content. It could be where people are needing to find other people to socialize with, and they're sharing their hashtags, they're sharing their gamer ID tag. It doesn't matter what it is. If you look at all the very famous, popular socialized applications from gaming to finance to images, all of them have tremendous usability K factor. When we did Draw Something, when we did OMG Pop, we had a 1 to 70 K factor. So for every one user we got organically, because we didn't pay users, then we had 70 more organically come. And so you have to think about how you're growing your audience around the usability of your product. It's the most important thing you can do to grow. And each app will be slightly different, because if you're a finance app, if you're an image app, if you're an editing tool, if you're a gaming app, you will have different touch points within your application that you can maximize to drive engagement and to drive virality. One of the reasons why we grew so much is because we enabled out of the gate for people to share the content on other platforms. And people would then hashtag it, deep link it, or say where they made the edit. And people automatically were like, wow, that is awesome. How did you make this content? It's so differentiated, so unique. One of the things that we've learned over the past 5 years of content creation and creators is that really, and that was the premise of the company, anybody can be creative. Anybody can express themselves and communicate through images and assets. And what's happened is that the maturity of the devices, the maturity of the user base has allowed them to create more and more unique assets by using more and more complex tools to differentiate themselves and to communicate and express themselves globally. And so as a Snap or other platforms which were closed, we grew significantly by discovery of people visualizing the content and asking about it, as well as word of mouth accordingly, and search. When you're in a vertical where there's high demand, people will search for the best apps. And so Google and the Google Play Store and the fact that it's more search-driven than rankings-based was a huge opportunity for us, because if you're either app of the year, if you're always in terms of high ratings, high reviews, if you understand the algorithms of the app stores, then having really high-quality apps that are in verticals of content or industries that have high global proliferation, people will be seeking the best apps, and thus search will drive your ability to get a lot of users. Another part of that was unique to us, we did weekly releases for the first 2 years. Now, that takes a lot of hands-on development cycles and processes, where today most people do a monthly release or bi-monthly release if you've got the resources and the aptitude of doing that. But releasing very quickly allowed us at that time, again, it's about figuring out how to drive growth, to kind of always be at the front page of the Google Play Store, because app of the week, new apps, new updates in the early days of the Google Play Store was about iteration. The more you iterated, the more you were constantly at the front of the homepage of the Google Play Store. And so we were able to drive tremendous organic growth in that way by constantly releasing. And even today, if you look at your apps and if you look at your I would say intake or updates of your apps, and you look at your DAUs directly correlated to when you update an app, you'll see a huge surge in engagement and in your virality factor or in your growth factor when you release and when you update your apps. And so there's value in not waiting long development cycles around release cycles. If you can have the right QA processes and the right resources to develop, to innovate, and to release quickly, you will actually see growth from that process operationally. And that was very important to us. Also allows you to figure out more ways faster to iterate on issues, solve bugs, and ultimately go back to the fundamentals of what makes an app successful, which is quality, experience, virality, discovery. Innovation is really important in general, but innovation goes in all sorts of different ways. It can be your back end and how you load your images. It can be design. it can be tools, it can be functionality. The innovation applies itself across your company. We, for example, when Prisma came out with automation of creating images into artistic-looking images, they were serving that in a different engineering factor than we were. We released 2 months later being able to directly serve that from the phone. And what we did is shave off 10, 15 seconds off of the factor of actually getting the edit done automatically through the engineering process. And that completely amplified the fact that we had that many users and delivering something faster of the same quality or better quality than an indirect competitor who was doing great automation that everybody downloaded Prisma because it was really cool. So all my friends in the Valley were like, Prisma this, Prisma that. 6 months later, nobody used the app anymore because singularity of functionality is not a longevity business. But where we innovated was on the engineering and the compression of the technology and serving it directly from the phone versus making a call on the back end. And that shaved 15, 20 seconds to the load time of the editing, and it made a huge difference. So innovation drives growth. Release cycles and quality releases will drive growth as well. Social relevance, something probably that wasn't very important 5+ years ago, is very important now. If you look at huge industries and huge verticals, and even ones that are much more niche, where like health and fitness industries and verticals in mobile that didn't really exist 5 years ago, social relevance becomes very important to how you get discovered because it's about people's interests and it's about what people socialize between each other. Whether it's Fortnite now, whether it's Pokemon Go. I mean, again, look at Snap. If you look at the usability and the experience, if you look at the products and the mobile apps that you may or may not use, but that you know about, that's social relevance, right? And that's hugely important to the fact that somebody at each of these tables will be using an app that they want to talk to somebody else about because they love that app and they think it's cool and it's socially relevant to talk about. Now, there are things that are less cool to talk about. Your finance app, you may talk about it to a certain vertical of people, but that particular user base may be much more core, may have longer lifetime value on a dollar basis, maybe higher retention on a certain age group demo basis. The point is, if you're in a vertical that people want to talk about, your proliferation of virality will be amplified. Now, we happen to be in the social content space, which really started booming in the early days of Instagram, and so we've been lucky to ride the wave on a global basis, and that's had a huge impact. There's plenty of verticals now that are growing very fast. Again, fitness, finance, where things are more relevant to a lot more people, more accessible, they're less taboo. There's all sorts of things that people will talk about in certain contexts, and if that vertical is growing, and you are socially relevant in that vertical, you will see growth from that. A/B testing, again, a lot of these things you'll go into details about, but they've all been hugely important to us. We A/B test, we probably do about 80 different A/B tests a month across our product. It's a lot. But we can A/B test banner promotions inside the app, our messaging on the push notification side, the funnel entry points to registration, the creatives on the ASO side of our app stores, and we are in 70 different app stores around the world, in 30 different languages around the world. But certain tweaks and certain changes, whether it's your image, whether it's your keyword, whether it's the text in your ASO, for example, whether it's the seasonality on a particular geo on a country basis, will have a tremendous impact on discovery, search, and thus ultimately results of installs. So A/B testing, if you're measuring those and if you have a particular goal to solve, will be hugely important to your growth because ultimately it's about accelerating certain engagement criteria or driving certain engagement criteria. So you should be doing a lot of A/B tests relative to your resources that are specific to key areas of engagement that you think are critical to demonstrating the value of your product. A particular action, a particular leveling curve in the game. We, for example, test around, how people discover each other a lot, right? Recommendation engines, the algorithm around the AI of the images, so that when you like certain things, we can show you certain things that are similar or of common interest. And so there's all sorts of areas of your own product and our product that we've done tremendous amount of A/B testing over the years that have had material impact in the engagement factor, and the higher retention, the higher in the engagement, the higher the virality, the higher the growth. So when you think about your KPIs and you're trying to figure out what to move, you have to really think about what are the most important, I would say, use cases and user stories that you're trying to solve in your product, and thus what are you A/B testing for around that funnel to try to amplify really key touch points and key engagement factors. International and localization, huge. They're huge factors. I mean, we have over 20 million monthly active users in India. We haven't spent $1. We have not even set foot on the ground yet We'll open offices this year, and we think we can double the growth in the next 12 months. So China went from 3 million to over 12 million monthly active users in 6 months. I went over there, I spent 2 years every quarter going there, as many others have done to be successful there. Hired a team on the ground, localized the content, QA on the ground, hosting on the ground. All those things amplify growth. We went from the fact that people couldn't load the images, couldn't use their WeChat or their Weibo login, to then hosting with Alibaba, legalizing an entity, finding local resources to do QA, improving the back-end call factor that was being pinged into different countries, and changing that dynamics to then seeing huge growth engagement simply because we solved the login pinging back-end factor by having a few resources on the ground and hosting differently. We expect that we'll pass 20 million monthly active users in China this year. We will be the largest foreign social non-gaming app in China. That's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, just because I went every quarter, spent 3 to 4 days, met with a ton of people, and ultimately figured out a strategy that would work for us. That's ultimately delivered now. And so localization matters because people will use your product around the world. There's plenty of countries in the APAC market that will be fine with the English, plenty who will not. If you go to Japan, don't be in English. If you go to India, don't be in English. And so China is the same. Like, they're just not going to use your product. And so finding partners, finding teams to be able to localize your product on a fundamental basis of text, of copy, of entry points, touch points, and then from there, understanding the culture, the behavior, the interest, what's socially acceptable, what's socially not acceptable. We've had brands come to us to want to do things in India, for example, that I know culturally are just not sensible to us, or politically not sensible. They're sensitive topics. There are issues at scale that we don't want to be a part of. And so then there's also a lot of opportunities, with seasonalities and holidays and family events. In Japan, they're very, very seasonal in how they go engaging and taking pictures and collaborating and doing things as a family or as friends. And so there's a lot of little things that you can do in the fundamentals of how you localize and thinking about the international markets, and in growing. And by the way, free users are free users. Important for me to note that we've grown to 500 million users without even spending 6 figures in direct marketing, right? This is true growth, true organic growth tied to how you run your business, and how you build a product over longevity. So international will be a huge boost. Again, 8 years ago, when Tencent invested in one of my companies in gaming, they had to. Tencent, if they weren't in America investing in American companies, nobody cared about Tencent. If anybody in this room doesn't know who Tencent is, that's scary. So it's really important to understand that now we have to go there, right? These companies don't need us, we need them. And there's tremendous opportunity in international markets where Tencent now has 1 billion users on WeChat. They have 1 billion users on QQ. They have, they're the largest gaming company in the world. And so you have to look to expand yourself, to gain opportunities to compete. And international markets are huge growth opportunities. Again, 8 years ago, if you weren't only US, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, then people were like, oh, what's your US KPIs? Now they're like, okay, what's the growth opportunities? How many people can write $1 billion check to buy our company? Well, more than half of those are in Asia. So we better be very strong over there if they're going to care about us and we're going to make an impact globally for companies or acquirers or users. So international is hugely important. Marketing, CRM, community. I didn't want to bundle community in there, but then we would have been 11 numbers and I wanted to keep it at 10. Because that in itself is a tremendous opportunity and so important. But marketing, CRM in itself, whether it's ASO, whether it's direct marketing, whether it's re-engagement, lifecycle management. There's first 2 people I hired when I joined the company was an ad ops person to start driving revenues to be profitable, because we had some fundamentals that were good enough to do that, and so there's a yield factor there, and resource to returns, and a CRM person, because the team I joined had never done a push. They had already had 100 million installs without a single push notification or email. That just wasn't really logical to me when you have that many users and millions of organic installs a month to not re-engage your users, knowing how much people are being marketed to. Every day you're being bombarded across your 20 plus key apps, maybe 15 on your device that are critical and instrumental to you. And so if you're not re-engaging your users, if you're not giving them a purpose comeback, if you're not telling them how many people are following them or like their images, or if they've won something, or if they're leveling up, or if they're running out of time, somebody else will be doing that and you won't be doing that. Now, all these things, and most of these things, we started the company by outsourcing all this, right? Partners, and many of them are in this room. And you don't have to build all these things. There's plenty of great vendors out there to get you off the ground, to give you the intellectual capital, to educate you. Always find vendors who can educate you because they've done this with other partners who have been successful, so that you can learn faster and understand what the usability context is of any vendor. And then the cost factor to the yield factor to your goals and your priorities. But CRM has been hugely important, whether it's re-engagement because people are churning, whether it's re-engagement because people are having social engagement, whether it's re-engagement because we want people to spend more money, subscribe, or be a part of the product. So there's different ways of doing CRM through email, through social, push notification, in-app modules. And ultimately, those have been hugely instrumental to our growth. We have a direct correlation between CRM and growth. Really something that's often undervalued and hugely impactful on a measurable basis. So obviously, the bigger you are, the more money you're spending on that, but the returns are significant. ASO is hugely important to any mobile app out there. Direct marketing, if you can arbitrage your product in gaming or other environments, finance, where there's huge ARPUs, long lifetime values, where you're dealing with more with a core user base, will make a lot of sense. But even in those contexts of whether you're spending a lot or not a lot against those, it goes back to for every dollar you're spending in any one of these environments, because it's about human resources, or it's about vendors, or it's about acquisition, there has to be a foundation to how it ties into all the rest. You shouldn't be spending money if the rest isn't working, because your yield factor is terrible at that point. Right? You're not really a good growth product. You're just a product that you're spending a lot on. No product that doesn't have good foundation of these other areas and decent KPIs, or isn't a decent product, can become a great product. No bad product will ever be a great product, no matter how much you do all these things. So you need a good foundation. You can spend into that. You can grow into that. You can A/B test into that. You can understand your K factors, etc. Community is big for any app that has any core users. Gaming, finance, health, fitness, right? I mean, Peloton. I mean, think about the way you can harness the power of the community. I mean, we have over 75 million monthly creators. They are all evangelists for us, right? They are all passionate people who can drive us more users, who can proliferate the brand, who can proliferate the usability, who can proliferate content. We cater to them. We have VIP programs. We have ambassadors. We bring them to betas, right? And then we amplify them in the feed or in our PR or in our social context. So we recognize users and we embrace them and we leverage them, because ultimately your user base is your most powerful tool. And so having a lot of community engagement, and most great brands and great large user base have great community engagement, is hugely valuable to your virality and your growth factor. Don't underestimate the fact that a community team, an editorial team, I've done 12 years in gaming, we always had a community team. How can you not cater to your core users, which then drives the experience of a game, and then drives the experience of those casual users who may never spend, but they need to be in the game as well. So you're dealing with different segmentations of users that you can learn to grow by catering to your community and your core users, and they will be ambassadors for you. Hugely important investments that you can make. And again, human resources. And there are many tools around managing communities, managing social tracking, hashtags, pushing links out there to multiple platforms at a time. And we've done all these things over time. KPIs. I know it's not sexy, but ultimately you have to understand what it is that you're trying to succeed against. So what are the key measurable data points around the funnel, around the product, that are a reflection of the fact that what you're working on matters, makes a difference, and that your product is successful. Now, some platforms, it may be ARPU. Some platform, it may be conversion from onboarding to registration. Some people, it's registration to paying. We have, unlike Facebook, which does time per DAU, we do edit per DAU. Right, so we focus very heavily on how many edits per DAU we see on a daily basis and on a monthly basis. And how we tweak that has a huge material impact on discovery, virality, time spent, engagement, and revenues. So to become a profitable company as we have, we had to measure and quantify things. Again, when we started, we worked with a lot of vendors, a lot of partners. Ultimately, now we have a 30-people growth data analytics team who supports us in these areas. But we have every quarter and every year very clear defined KPIs, and there's usually never more than 3 to 5 of them that are, significantly more, important on a business strategy basis than the 20, 30, 40 that you can have on an individual kind of touch point basis. But everything that our teams do funnels back into, is it going to impact those particular KPI? And for us, again, it's, MAU, DAU, MAU per DAU, DAU edit created, and ultimately dollar per DAU. And we measure that funnel every day on a real-time basis. And we look at the key criteria that people are working on a development cycle basis to impact those specifically. And if people are working on things that don't materially move those, you've lost your time, you've lost your capital, you've distracted other people. So KPI allow you to focus and prioritize and ultimately kind of hold everybody to a similar standard of time spent towards things that are materially impactful, the same way you're trying to deliver that for your users. So however chaotic startups are, and they are, and every one of them are out there, there's nothing sexy about them when you're working internally to them, everybody has to be in that realm. Everybody has to think about what it is that we're trying to achieve by moving these particular data points. And it centralizes everybody's focus, and it creates way greater efficiency, which then impacts innovation or release cycles or how we go about A/B testing, other fundamental areas about how we grow our business. Funding, a part of the process. Everything that I've staged out here are an evolutionary process to how you're growing your company. You're not going to have all these out of the gate. You're not going to be able to focus on all these out of the gate, not even the first 12 months. You'll do segmentation and fragmentation of each of these depending on the resources and your founders. But ultimately, funding will come along being successful and growing a company, because even if you're not buying users, you're hiring talent, right? You're paying for vendors. You're supporting the growth. You're trying to accelerate that growth. And you need funding for that. It's an important part of successful companies. We've raised a lot less than anybody at our size that I know of in the social realm out there. Only $35 million of working capital. I say only because most of them are worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So we feel really good about that. We feel really good because, as founders and employees and shareholders, we control our company, and that's great for everybody as well. And so funding matters as it relates to your cycles of development and how you project your growth and how you invest in that. And so funding for any company is very strategic and tactical. You have to understand what you're raising and why, how that capital is going to be used, and how you're going to deliver value for that, not just for your investors, but for the product and for your users. And so funding is an important part of, again, delivering on the other ones. Talent relates to funding and executing on all the other components of this overall plan. Talent is everything. You can't deliver on any of this without great people. You need great leadership, but ultimately, I only say I win if my employees win. And the reality is, you want great leadership, but you need people who can deliver on these opportunities and on these requirements of building a great company. However strong your leadership is, the talent needs to be even better. You want to hire smarter, more talented people with more experience, and if at minimum as much grit as you do, but with skills that you do not have or that need to be significantly deeper in their aptitudes. And again, all these are areas that you will dive in more actively today, and at different stages of your business, these will become critical. You will go from, hey, I can handle this with 20% of your time to, hey, I need a full-time CRM person. Like, I don't really understand push to the extent that it could deliver 3 to 4x growth for us, where I'm only doing it 20 minutes of my day or my hour, and only delivering a 1x return on that. And at some point, that's just not going to deliver you a great company. So talent is really, really important to delivering on this, because it's about headcount. And for headcount, you need funding. For funding, you need to have fundamental product value proposition and certain KPIs and growth to deliver against. That's differentiated. The thing that I put last, and this weren't necessarily in full order, but kind of in order, was PR and branding. Not that many people know about us. Most people in this room probably didn't know about us. So it's surprising sometimes how big we are with how few people know about us. Other times, well, we don't really care because we're still growing at over 10 million organic installs a month, more than that. It's just not been our strength. It does take particular skill sets, particular types of products, and particular awareness of usability to deliver on that. But it's the least impactful thing that you can do. The fact is, we've had 400 or 500 million users, and again, probably 75% of people in this room never heard about us, and yet, 500 million people in the world have used us. So there's things that you can improve on. It is important. Usually PR and brand will feed itself because you have a great product, because you're socially relevant, because people are using you, because you're innovating, right? PR comes from the fact that you have stories to tell, that people want to learn about real context of other human being loving your product, engaging with your product, because brands are talking about it, because celebrities are using it, right? So because you're innovating and differentiating yourself on a technology basis, right? Because you're expanding a new market. Like, there has to be a purpose, right? Nobody cares about another executive doing another press release about nothing except touting themselves. Like, that's not PR, that's not branding, right? The product should sell itself, right? The branding comes from the fact that you're dealing with human stories and people across a wide net of segmentations, demographics, and usability cases that entice other people are amazing stories. We've had, the breastfeeding mom movement, user application, and over 1 million mothers use our application to create this tree of life, and you can hashtag it and search it, images that put a tree root between their babies and themselves breastfeeding. 1 million mothers recreated this image through the movement of breastfeeding, which we had no involvement in. But when you're socially relevant and there's things that are really human, and we do a lot of things with foundations, we work with a lot of nonprofits, a lot of different brands around the world, brands and content companies use our platforms to engage users because of the obviously creator factor. But those are real human stories. We've had users become professional artists, be shown in galleries. Those are the human stories that people want to hear about, that differentiate your product, that people care about. We've created social influencer networks, and now our users, through a partner, can monetize their creation and the time they spent creating amazing assets. So we've grown around the PR by letting the stories of our users, the stories of the content, the proliferation in the market, people's social interests, the social relevancy drive that, versus simply state that we've got another edit feature, or we've got another tool, or we did something cool on the back end that really doesn't speak to the human condition and what people care about when it comes to brand and PR. We've been lucky to, across the last 5 years, deliver on these better in some cases and a lot of improvements still needed in others, but to the extent that it's allowed us to grow organically to over 500 million users, over 100 million monthly actives. I would say that fundamentally talent, helped drive that, and ultimately delivering through the talent on all these other areas and the fundamentals of driving a great business, right? The singularity of these is not sufficient to have a longevity business. You're only 5 years. We did draw something. We were the talk of the town like Pokemon Go for about 24 months, right? Now, it reached $100 million, I think in April for Pokemon Go, but nobody's talking about it anymore. It's not dead. It's still an awesome product. It was the same with Draw Something, et cetera. The ability to drive longevity is very hard in this world, right? I mean, the 10-minute, the 10-second, I'm not even sure 10-second popularity anymore matters, given the landscape we live in politically and socially. But it's really hard to create longevity and to create relevance for people continuously, every day, every month, right? When you see how much you are all being bombarded with different products, with people telling you to do something else, to use something else, with our attention span diminishing. And you need to deliver on a multitude of these over a long period of time to be able to have a sustainable, successful company. So those are my 10 tips. Good luck.